Alright, let's talk about my most surprising reads of last year. In terms of talking about the most surprising books, they're books that I either didn't have any expectations going into them and they ended up being really good, or they're books that I actively had bad expectations going into them and they ended up being much better than I thought they would. These aren't ranked in any sort of order, I'm just gonna talk about them. I believe there's 10. Let's get into it. The first book is Louisiana Longshot by Jana DeLeon. And when I say that, I mean the entire series, because I binged all of it last year. This series took over my entire fucking life. There are 23 books in this series, and I just listened to all of them as audiobooks, which was the way to go. And it just made my year better. This series is about a CIA agent named Fortune Redding who is on the run after having a hit put out on her by this cartel member. She ends up having to kind of lay low in this Louisiana town, but unfortunately right when she gets there, someone ends up being murdered, and because this is kind of her thing, she decides she's going to solve it. She ends up working with these two older women in the town who used to be some sort of spy operatives or something, or they were in the military. This is what makes the series so great, is their antics, their hijinks, and just their general friendship. I love them so much. There's also a relationship, slow burn, will they, won't they, with Carta LeBlanc, who is the sheriff who just kind of gets sick of having to pull Fortune out of all this shit she gets herself into, especially because she's supposed to be this librarian. And so her having to explain how she keeps getting herself into these situations is ridiculous and fun. I just loved everything about it. I will say there are some things I don't love. Early on in the series, there's very much this not like other girls bullshit. Regardless, I actually think the books kind of get better as they go. They remind me of the Stephanie Plum books, which I used to really love when I was younger. These books were just a delight, and they brought a lot of joy in my life. The next book on my list is Girls with Bright Futures by Wendy Katzman and Tracy Domeyer. If you like Big Little Lies or just anything Liane Moriarty writes, this is for you. I went into this not having any expectations really. I just saw that I was auto-approved for it on NetGalley, and so I was like, cool, I'm in the mood for an audiobook. It was there. I was in the mood for some rich people drama, and this one ended up being so much better than I expected. This was definitely influenced, I think, by the Varsity Blues scandal with Felicity Huffman and that lady who played Rebecca on Full House, and how they got their daughters into these Ivy League schools by bribing different people and lying on their applications. It's very much kind of influenced by that. It follows these 3 or 4 different moms as they're all trying to get their daughters into these schools and kind of the lengths they're willing to go to. Just like Big Little Lies, there is one character who's from a more struggling background who doesn't quite keep up with the Joneses. There's obviously some darker things that go on. I believe someone gets hit by a car in a hit and run situation and they're trying to figure out who did it. I just really ended up liking this. I wasn't expecting much from it, and I love some rich people drama bullshit. And this one just had everything I was looking for in that realm of things. I think I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I would really recommend it. The next thing on my list is something I definitely didn't think I'd be talking about, at least in the terms of being good, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. When this book was coming out, I had so many mixed emotions. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games series, which I just love. I thought there was just so much that could have been done with this. The Hunger Games was a thing that had been around for a while, but at that point it had a rich history, all these people who had gone through and fought to the death. And so it just felt like there were so many years they could have chosen for this that would be amazing. And people kept talking about all the possibilities, and it just got me so excited. And then it was revealed that the book was going to be about President Snow. Could not have been more disappointed in that decision. I just thought why the fuck would I want to read a book about that? And then I saw the reviews come out. It definitely led me to believe that I wasn't going to like this. But I gotta say, I should have trusted in Suzanne Collins. I really ended up liking this. I don't think it falls into any of the pitfalls that I thought it was going to do. The thing about President Snow is I was very worried that this was going to be some sort of redemption story, or there was going to be some sort of softening of his character, and in my opinion, that is not at all what this story does. This story follows along with President Snow as he's younger and as he's kind of shaping the Hunger Games into what we know that they become. And it just like really shows the way his mind works. Do I have it here? Yeah, I do. I have the book, apparently. He ends up having to mentor the tribute from District 12, which is the poorest district. And of course, he's very offended by this. And I just feel like you really get to see the way his brain works. You get to see how fucking entitled he is. He starts to have feelings for this character, and that could have went in a very poor direction. That, like I said, that could have gone in a way that was meant to soften his character. And like, that is not what happens at all. Especially in this like last tiny chunk of the book, watching the way he thinks, it was just so good. This is by far a character study more than anything. I think it really shows how President Snow came to be who he is, but that there was always that part of him lurking there, that it was not necessarily the situations that like drove him to do it. This was just who he was and who he was always going to be. Because when you are a person who looks for every advantage, when you are the person who is fine with stepping over everybody else and fine with just watching people suffer as long as you come out on top, then of course it is easier to come to power. It definitely wasn't a perfect book. I mean, it is a fucking doorstop, and it definitely didn't need to be. I came away not knowing fully why this was written. I don't know if it necessarily added a lot to the story, but I did enjoy being back in this world again, and so even if she comes out with like 5 more prequels, I will gladly eat them up. The next thing on my list is The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. My brain just blanked for a second. I should have known I was going to like this. I've really enjoyed pretty much everything I've read from Stephen Graham Jones. The only exception is the last Final Girl. That one I didn't enjoy so much, but that was actually the first thing I ever read by him. I wasn't planning on picking up The Babysitter Lives because I knew it was just an Audible exclusive, or at least an audio book exclusive. I like having things to physically read, and I definitely wish that this was a physical read. I think that this is an ebook or physical book, whatever, just I needed something to read along with this for various reasons. But regardless, I really ended up liking this. If you like Poltergeist, this very much feels like that. This was, I mean, I guess what it sounds like is this babysitter comes and babysits his children, and some weird, creepy shit start happening. Stephen Graham Jones does such a good job at writing things that don't make sense, things that are off-putting, disorienting, getting into like the mind of a child, seeing things how they see things, or like explaining things in a dream. It's that like surrealist nature. He's just really good at it, and there are moments in this book, because it has some Portal-ish type situations just like Poltergeist does, that they just really worked for me. But like I said, I do wish that there was something to read along with, because I did get confused at multiple points just because I wasn't reading it physically with my eyes. I love horror that involves children, but also involves like the imagination of children and how that can be turned on its head to be horror. And if you were at all hesitant to pick this up like I was, I would implore you to at least give it a try. I actually think this is like one of the top things I've read from him. Solidly in the top half, at least. My next thing on this list is Invincible, the comic series, but specifically Volume 3. If you read this series, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I had been hearing about this series for a really long time, but mostly because of the TV show, I think. It's like I heard about it, but I never took in what it was about. I never really took in what people were saying, just that people said it was good. And so when I picked up the first volume, I was just like, okay, I mean, I get what it's doing, but like, it's not really for me. It very much felt like this father-son saving the world sort of thing. They're superheroes, but you're not really watching them do the superhero stuff. You're watching how the superhero stuff impacts their daily life. It felt very slice of life, and I was just like, oh, like, this is nice. But then like I saw that some of it was on Hoopla, so I was like, well, why not just like pick some more up if they're there? And I got to the end of volume 3 and it just blew my mind. I was not at all expecting the direction it took. I should have been. It is shame on me for that, because like it's written by Robert Kirkland, who wrote The Walking Dead. I should have known, but like the balls on this man to not drop that shit that's just like complete 180 until volume 3. Bravo. Just incredible. Loved it. Will say, didn't like anything that came after. I think I stopped reading around like volume 6 or 7 because like it just got kind of boring after that, and they kind of walked back some of the stuff I liked in the 3rd volume, but like regardless, I just was super impressed by what they did there and had to mention it. I mean, that is truly like the most surprising of the things I read, just in terms of like, whoa, what the fuck. The next book on my list is one from an author I've read before and have not liked, and that is why this book was so surprising, and that is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I've read multiple Alice Feeney books at this point, and I have not liked any of them. She reminds me, and I don't know if anyone's gonna get this reference, but it reminds me of watching an episode of The Simpsons or Law & Order SVU. I know, totally different things, but where you start off in one place and then you get to the end of the book and you're at a completely different place. And you're just like, how did we get here? Like, what does this have to do with this? And like, it doesn't. It's just like she is taking you on a journey throughout a bunch of bullshit, and I can never understand what we're talking about anymore. It's just never once worked for me in all of her works. But Daisy Darker, I loved it. I gave this 5 stars. It could have been on like my top books of the year list, but like I actually had a surprising amount of like 5-star reads, so that's why it didn't, and I felt like it fit this list better. I was just really surprised how much I loved it. I believe you could consider this and then the Renan retelling. There's an island, there's a family who comes to it, and there's this creepy poem written on a chalkboard, and it's telling how people are gonna die, and then they die, and you're trying to figure out like who's doing it and why. And everything about this worked for me. The twist at the end, I fully didn't see coming, which usually that shit does not surprise me, and it worked. I really liked this one. And I think part of the reason I liked this one, it was a lot more straightforward than any of her other books. So I hope this is the route she continues down. This one was great. The next book on my list is Go Down Hard by Ali Shea. The reason this one was surprising for me was because I had actually DNF'd it at one point, and I wasn't ever really planning on going back to it, but I'm really glad I did. This was a short horror novel about 2 serial killers who end up living next door to each other. The tension that these 2 characters end up having, you just do not know if they are going to fuck each other or if they're going to kill each other. You're actually pretty sure they might do both. You don't know. And it got so much dirtier and grittier than I was expecting it to, and I loved it. It was such a fun time. I didn't like the beginning at first. The writing wasn't working for me totally, and yet it got there. If you like a female serial killer, this one might be for you. The next book on my list is The Lost Causes of Bleak Creek by Rhett and Link from here on YouTube, from Good Mythical Morning. I can't believe I read this year. This feels so long ago. I wasn't expecting a lot from this for a variety of reasons. I mean, one, it's a book written by YouTubers, which maybe that's awful, but I just don't expect a lot. But another reason I also just like wasn't expecting a lot is because it definitely feels like that Stephen King-esque thing that I don't always enjoy, where it's like the small town and the young boys who went through something and are fighting back against it. Very much a coming-of-age tale. I haven't always liked that, but I think what this book made me realize is I haven't enjoyed it because it's written by Stephen King. If it's written by somebody else, I do have a chance of enjoying it. This book got darker than I was expecting it to, and it got a little more realistic while also dealing with some sci-fi sort of nature. It also felt like there was some like organized religion sort of criticism in here, which I appreciated. It definitely had this aspect of these kids who are watching this thing happen and knowing it's wrong and wondering why the adults aren't doing anything about it. The audiobook was a little bit rough because just anytime there's adults doing children's voices, especially a girl's voice, that part was bad. I would probably read it physically, but it was really good. I feel like I really liked the quote-unquote like bad thing, like the thing they're fighting against. I really liked how that worked. I liked how the scenes near the end with that worked. I like anything that can blend horror with some real life commentary with a sci-fi aspect. The next book on this list is another horror, and that is Clown in the Cornfield by Adam Cesare. I don't know what I was expecting this book to be about, but I really liked it. It's so ridiculous. This is, I mean, basically what it sounds like. There's a killer in this small town. The town is like dying because it used to be that most of the jobs and most of the economy was kind of built around this one snack factory, I believe is what it is. And that factory's mascot was a clown named Frendo. So that's where this whole thing came about. They're trying to get the factory like started back up again. And anyways, kids start dying. There's like this town divide between like the older generation and the younger generation because like, goddamn those teenagers for being so rowdy. The pace was fucked. That was probably like the one downside I would say about the book, is that there was way too long in certain scenes and then other things went way too fast. That was weird. But the ending of this book, the like thing that's happening here is so good, and I mean that in like the worst way possible, almost. It's one of those things that is so bad, it's good. It's so dumb that it comes back around and it's entertaining as fuck. Like, it's just so silly, but I think it's done in a very tongue-in-cheek way, and I loved it. It's definitely a YA novel, but I still think it brings the gore. I enjoyed the kills. I got nothing but good things to say about it, and I can't wait to read the second one. But definitely don't go into this if you're the type who like takes all your books really seriously, because it will not work for you if you do. And the last book on my list of the most surprising books of the year was 14 by Peter Clines. The reason this book was surprising to me was that when I started reading it, I was hating it. Like, I had to drag my ass through the first like 100 pages or so. I was just so bored and so irritated by this main character. Once I started kind of like getting who the main character was and what he was doing, I started to really like it, and then the book really picked up and I ended up loving it. So this book is about this guy who's kind of at a dead-end job. He feels like he hasn't really like figured out anything about his life. He's like 30 years old and he's like, wasn't I supposed to know what I'm doing by now? And he ends up in this like shitty apartment complex, and he starts to notice some weird things going on. So he strikes up conversations with other people who live in the building, and they end up investigating what these weird things are. The weird things start off so silly, so mundane. I'm like, why are you looking into the dumbest, most blandest mysteries ever? He starts talking about these weird looking cockroaches, or he'll talk about how there's like a blacklight in his kitchen. And just like dumb things like that. Oh, like one of the walls is sort of cold. And I'm just like, who would care about this? But that's kind of the point. This character has nothing going on in his life. Like, that is why he's looking into these things. But the way these things like ratchet up and just like some crazy ass shit goes down in the second half of this book, loved it. On the cover it says a riveting apocalyptic mystery in the style of Lost, but in an apartment building. Like that, I thought to myself, like, how could that possibly be true? It is. Don't know what to tell you. They did it. I cannot wait to read the other books in this series. I never thought I was that much of a sci-fi girl, but if you give it to me in the form of this, I'm into it. So that's it. Those are the 10 most surprising books that I read last year. I hope you found something that maybe you're interested in and that will surprise you too. And I hope you like this video, and I will come back in soon.